This is weird.
If they didn't do what you did, they won't turn out as good as
Good to see you, by the way. Good to see some very familiar faces. So as mentioned by Ruchler, I'm Elan Javenfard. I was here in TJ from 2006 till 2008. It was like a year and a half, and then I switched to base, and I was there for about a year and a half. It's the move, by the way. Then it was. Before now, you guys have, yeah. I live in Los Angeles. I grew up in Los Angeles, and in Los Angeles, I work in suicide prevention and suicide treatment for the state of California. Yes, unfortunately. A lot of the treatment work that I do, what I usually tell people is, if you've needed my help, you needed help a long time ago. So my personal specialty is suicide, personality disorders, and cutting. So people who are mix in some substance use, mix in a cannibal here or there. All of the above is yes. That's I didn't make that up. All of the above, more than once, is the work that I was doing in Los Angeles for quite a while. And it happens to be that when I came to TJ, my plan was to go to law school. And my career path and trajectory into clinical psychology changed while I was actually in yeshiva. There were Rebbeim here that I connected with who kind of, well, one steered me to stay in yeshiva, and that didn't work out for them. But went down a more rounded path to incorporating a psychological perspective that is exclusively a Torah-based psychological perspective. So I was going to share a little bit about that with you guys. So when I originally came to TJ, on the day where we did, like, I didn't know anybody in yeshiva. There was no other guys that came. There was like one guy who came from Los Angeles who I didn't know in Los Angeles. He was in a different high school. I never met him actually until we came to Israel. And the morning where they did orientation to like introduce everyone who was here, and there was like the Shana Bet guys who were already here. I came downstairs in a Terrell Owens TO jersey when he switched to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm a huge football fan, and was wearing Homer Simpson flip-flops that were like fuzzy flip-flops, and had like a Dallas Cowboys hat on as well. And the newer students, who were the first-year students, assumed that it was some kind of like joke, because they asked me to stand up, and I had no idea why they asked me to stand up, because I had just met the Rabbanim. And they then went over all the things that you can't wear in yeshiva based off of what I was wearing, except for the slippers being fine. And everyone assumed that like this was like a prop prank thing that was set up, but no, it wasn't. I was just like I'm gonna see who's out there. I'm gonna see who these people are. I'm gonna show up and see if they're gonna rock with football or not. And that's the style and the personality I had. Like, flash forward to now, my closest friends in the world are guys that I was in yeshiva with. So before I came on this trip to Israel, I was staying at my roommate from yeshiva's house in Teaneck before I flew out here. So that's a connection that I made. But the thing I wanted to talk about with us as a group, and then definitely after Mincha, if anyone wants to like chat a little bit about it, is the intersection between psychology and Torah, and how there is just a fundamental overlap between the two. And anytime somebody says like therapy is really expensive, I can't afford it, I can't figure out how to get the help I need, what I've guided them to, if they're somebody who actually has a little bit of an affinity towards learning, is just read the Vilna Gaon's Pirush on Mishlei, and that's all you need. You don't need anything else. You can do all of every psychological concept in popular psychology just falls directly from somewhere in the Torah, way before psychologists came out with it. A classic example is there's a concept in therapy or psychology from Freud. Freud was like the father of modern psychology. And he came up with an idea called the id, ego, and superego. 3 different parts of a person that are supposed to be, one is supposed to be your like primordial instinct, one is supposed to be your like super logical reasoning, and the person who's like the rule follower and is driven to something that's more purposeful and a higher power. And the other is supposed to be like this middle ground who's trying to figure their way between their primordial body and the spiritual or a higher level instinct of moral compass. It's ruach, it's nefesh, ruach, neshama. And ruach, nefesh, neshama was written and put together as a concept way before Freud thought he was innovative and came up with something that made sense to people who were reading it for the first time. It's been around for ages, the idea that you need to come up with some kind of harmony between these three things for yourself to feel and live a healthy life. Something that people who are suicidal frequently are challenged with, but it's not just people who are suicidal. In general, most people struggle with some kind of harmony between all three aspects of this. What do I follow in terms of my rules? How do I take care of my body? How do I take care of myself to feel connected to this ground, connected to this earth, and enjoy things at the same time? But the idea that resonated with me the most when I was doing some research, so I do research in the area of mindfulness as a treatment methodology for suicide. And the idea that resonated for me the most was that my son, he's 5, his favorite song to sing around the house is pumping up to Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch Olam Vaed, the house beat one that they play at every single wedding you've ever heard. And as a Sephardi, we do that in Slichot all the time, and it was very hard to figure Slichot out when I was here in Yeshiva, by the way. But then there was a Persian shul in the building here that we ended up, that saved us from getting kicked out of Rosh Hashanah davening when they were everyone needs to go outside right now because they're doing Yiskor. I was I don't know what that is. We don't do that thing. Why are you telling me to leave the shul? If I'm leaving the shul, I'm not coming back. And we went and found a Sephardi minyan. That literally happened. So the thing that bothered me about this pasuk for quite a while is if you look at the phrasing of the pasuk, it's Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch Olam Vaed. The tenses are out of order. So it's Hashem Melech, he's your king. He's presently your king. Hashem Malach, he was your king previously or in the past. And Hashem Yimloch Olam Vaed, it's future. The tenses are not in the chronological tense order. It's present, past, future. And in doing research in the ideas and theories of mindfulness, we started to realize that if people don't have a grounding point in the present, they're going to struggle with being stuck in a loop between the past and the future. They're going to become anxious, they're going to become depressed. One of the ideas that we talk about in the field of psychology pretty frequently is something called a feedback loop. It's when you get stuck between thinking something in the future is going to happen again because of something that happened to you in the past, and you keep doing this over and over again, and because you keep doing it over and over again, you actually end up doing it over and over again because you're not actually making a new choice in the present. One of my favorite quotes that we use for people related to that, and I wrote it down to make sure I got it correctly, is the past is supposed to be a place of reference, not a place of residence. It's supposed to be a place of reference, not a place of residence. And the theory that we put together in our work is this concept called the triangle intervention, where we ask clients whether they are experiencing anything that's high risk or really, really challenging in their life, or if they're just going through a struggle and don't know what their challenge is. We ask them to take out a sheet of paper, or they do it mentally in their head and draw a triangle. So you can visually or mentally for yourself or on your phone, draw a triangle for a second for yourself. And what we ask people to do is write at the bottom of the triangle past, and the other side of the triangle future, and at the top present. So a triangle with 3 different points of time listed on this, and say to them, how much mental time do you spend on a daily basis living in the past? How much mental time do you spend typically living in the future? And how much mental time do you typically spend living in the present? And ask them to break it down by 100%. So what percent would you say is past? What percent would you say is present? And what percent would you say is future? We ask them to kind of draw this out and map that out based off of their own definitions of whatever past is, whatever present is, whatever future is, just putting them down. And I'll take a second to just get you guys, if you're interested, to kind of think about that. Break your numbers down for yourself for a moment. I promise to not diagnose you or label you unless you are Rabbi Buchler, because I had that diagnosis from years ago. I promise I won't, but take a moment, think about it, and put some numbers down. And if anyone is interested, share what those numbers may look like out loud so we get a sense of what your triangle may be. Gives me a second to drink something. I made a bracha before we started. Anyone want to share? Yeah. And who you are, from where also, that helps. Okay, nice.
I would say probably 30% in the future, 10% in the past, and 60% in the present.
Okay, so 10% in the past, 60% in the present, 30% in the future. Okay, cool. Thank you. Anyone else?
Not from Semel from Chicago.
Okay.
About 50% in the future, 40% in the present, and 10% in the past.
10, 40, 50. Got it. I do it in that order. It helps me picture it. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone who's possibly not one of the students? Go ahead.
I was 10 in the past, 10 in the future, and 80 in the present.
Good. 10 in the past, 10 in the future, 80 in the present. Thank you. Anyone else want to give it a try? Yeah.
From
Brooklyn.
I would say probably 45, and 5% in the present.
45 in the past, 45 in the future, 5% in the present. Thank you for your willing. 10%. Thank you for your, it's okay, math's not my strong suit. Thank you for your willingness to share as well. Okay, so the research that we did suggests that the optimal numbers are 15% in the past, 15% in the future, and 70% in the present. It's the optimal numbers. Plus minus 5% based off of people's ages. So like younger people should be a little bit more in the future, and older people should be a little bit more in the past rather than the other way around. And what we realized, so like, and that's the optimal perspective. What's also healthy is that at least your present should be 50%, so it equals the two other sides and not be greater. So 25, 25, and 50. That's optimal. And by doing this work, what we realize is when people come up with their triangles, generally speaking, a person who's more inclined to say their numbers are in the past, they're significantly more susceptible to depression. They're significantly more susceptible to substance use, abuse, not use. Everyone uses drugs, in LA at least. Substance abuse and depression, and they're significantly more susceptible to feeling high levels of anger, shame, and guilt. And a person who is more in the future is going to be significantly more susceptible to anxiety, purposelessness, and hopelessness. So it's not a diagnosis or a label, but think about that for a moment. When you look at those numbers in that breakdown, and you think about this when there's people that you may know that may be in some kind of loop with this as well, generally speaking, the heavier you are in one of these tenses that's rather than present, you're going to struggle a little bit with that numerical value, what's going on there. There's a lot of treatment options, a lot of things that people can do on them, but one of the things that I thought was really fascinating in understanding this is that oftentimes people get stuck in the past or in the future because they're really driven by their heart. They're chasing their heart. They're chasing something that they feel is an emotion or an instinct or something that is just reminding them of something that they could be missing in the future by looking at other people's things. And there are also sometimes people who are struggling with just trying to feel like I'm stuck in the emotions of the past or bad, challenging things that happened to me. It's fascinating because you take those two tenses together, 15% and 15%, you can have the gematria of the word of the letter lamed, which is lev, heart, somebody's heart. And the ayin, which would be the other 70%, is a person who's struggling to not follow what they see in front of them. That's directly in front of their eyes. That's not directly there for them to experience. The 90% should be follow what's directly in front of your eyes, like as we hear in Shema, follow what's there in front of you, right there with you. And I had shared this concept with a few of the rabbis that I'm close with in Los Angeles when I was putting some of the research together to make sure that it aligned in some of the things I was talking about. And then a few weeks after that, I had the opportunity where Rav Yitzchak Yosef visited Los Angeles to have a Sefer Torah dedicated in LA. So for those who aren't Sephardi and don't know who that is, shame on you. And for those who are Sephardi and don't remember who that is, Rav Yosef's son, who helped put together a lot of his books and his farm. And I sat with him and asked him, what advice would you give to somebody who is suicidal and experiencing suicidal gestures or suicidal inclinations from a Torah lens? And he said, I'm not a therapist. They need to go be in therapy. They need counseling, which I thought was a great answer. And I said, okay, what would the Torah say on that? And he said to me, he said, Ayin Rashi in Parshat Shoftim, which happens to be my bar mitzvah parsha. And when he pointed to the pasuk that he told me to look at, it happens to be the pasuk that I spoke about at my bar mitzvah speech. I didn't speak anything to do with what he told me to look at because I was a 13-year-old kid who didn't understand the idea. But I think that there's a lot of, it's not a coincidence that's what he told me. So he told me to go look at the pasuk in Shoftim, which specifically is talking about why there is a mitzvah's lo taseh of not chasing after like sorcerers or magicians or people who are trying to be fortune tellers. And the pasuk there says, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. You should always wholeheartedly be following with Hashem. And what Rashi says right there, right away, is, so Rashi says, Ki hagoyim ha'ele asher ata yoresh otam, sorry, here's the Rashi. I was looking at something else. Hitalech imo im Hashem bitmimut, v'lo te'acher acharei ha'atidut. Ki ha'atidut kol ma sheyavo elech v'tekabel bitmimut. What he's saying in the Rashi there is, don't go chasing after the future. Don't go chase after what's coming in the future. Stay as much as you can in the present, because in the present, you are going to be able to wholeheartedly be and accept with Hashem. Which goes back to what we said at the beginning and answers two things. One is to help somebody actually stay healthy emotionally, you need to be present focused. You need to be living in the now. You can't be living in the future, and you can't be living in the past. You can't be thinking every day while you're in yeshiva about what happened when you lived in America before you came here. And you can't be thinking all the time as well what your plan is tomorrow and where you're going to go and where you're going to do next year. You need to enjoy the experience you have here. And this is something I learned this entire week. I've been here in Israel doing trauma treatment with people who've been living vicarious trauma through what happened after October 7th. And that's been my entire week. And I've sat with Zaka members to go over their experience and provide psychological first aid. And I walked through the Nova Festival in Kibbutz Be'eri with people who survived that experience to help them kind of come up with a new narrative of what that experience was like for them. And the entire idea that they kept sharing is that we just have to take everything one day at a time. We can't go back to what happened in the future, and we can't go back to what happened in the past, and we can't go back to what's going on in the future as well. We just need to remain where we are. And that gives a final answer to the song and the pasuk that my son loves singing as well. The tenses are out of order because if Hashem is not your melech presently, then it's not relevant that he was your melech in the past, and it's not relevant that he's your melech in the future. If you don't accept him wholeheartedly today in the present, then it's going to be a challenge for you to accept him wholeheartedly in the past and everything that he provided you then. And it's going to be a challenge for you to accept wholeheartedly that everything he's planning for you is planned and is going to come your way anyways in the future. You have to see him through that lens that he's with me now and I'm with him always. And then I understand why the things in the past have happened to me, and I understand why the things in the future are going to be coming my way as well. And it's an idea that I really wish I understood when I was in yeshiva, so that I would have wasted significantly less time and came up with more of an accelerated way of like going through my learning and connecting these things. Because in our work in therapy, there's a quote that people really, really like to say, which is that yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and the present is a gift. Enjoy it. Yeah, enjoy it. So I thank you for giving me the time to speak. I know Mincha is going to start in a few moments. So thank you for having me here. And I'm going to stick around for a little bit if anyone wants to chat or hear about anything or has any questions about things that these rabbis used to do many, many years ago before they knew you guys. So thank you guys again.